Yeah, we have lots to talk about today.
We've actually planned and thought about it.
Well, stuff happened during the week, and we had a brief discussion and thought, you know what? That's actually worth recording. So, when it comes to working in systems, working with other people, working with our own systems, both of us has lots of experience. Uh, and wanted to sort of just chat about working with other people, obviously not disclosing names because we can't, but one of the experiences that I've had recently is looking through timelines of someone or a group of people, and it's in Google Sheets. It still works. It looks like a timeline, a Gantt chart sort of thing. But they had separated 2 weeks for this one thing, i.e., researching and scripting. And for me, I am researching and scripting and editing and publishing all in the same week, just 3 different videos, tiered. So I'm looking
Mm.
at it going, is that all they're doing? Are they just doing like 8 hours of researching and scripting a day for 2 weeks straight? That, that just seems crazy to me. And then the same with editing. So they do like the 2 weeks of scripting and then the 3 weeks of editing, and I'm like, yes, I understand that, but that's just one video in essentially 5, 6 weeks. So that's like a month and a
Mm.
half focused on one video. I focus on two, sometimes 3 videos a week. So I can get videos out every week or every 2 weeks. Maybe there is more to the video. I don't know. It just seems a bit constrained with where the focus is. I would get so bored doing the same video for 2 weeks
I think
alone.
it's probably carrying all the assumptions on productivity. That's my only observation that it could be of like, this is how you're supposed to be productive, one thing at a time. Have a really focused thing. Like focus, one thing. We can only focus on 5 to 8 pieces of information at a time. We can only store so much information in our brain. That's the over the year when I speak and work with people, that's where they always start of like, oh, I'm just overwhelmed. I've got too many things. I need to streamline and simplify and cut things down. And I'm like, why? You don't want to. If you did, you would have.
I think it relates to the idea of focus and
Mm.
attention, and
Yeah.
and you need to focus on one project. Why just the one? Why just the one? Because as soon as you get ingrained and you're tuning your focus on specific pieces of information in that project, sometimes you may need to step back and
Mm.
self-organize at a higher level of what it is that's going on, which requires a shift of focus
Oh no. No,
and
we can't
and
do that. We
and,
can't
and
do
task switching.
Oh, they're dangerous. Can't have task switching.
And
Allowed task switching. Danny, how could you recommend task switching?
I know it's not like I do it every 2 hours in a day.
Same, same.
So so it's even without giving too much context, the individuals that are doing like this, obviously they're successful. They're doing what they need to do. And they ask me to do a task, and I'm like, I will do this task for you, but can I please just like poke and ask these questions because I don't understand. Excel sheets as a way to manage time, sort of get, but I'm like, what tasks? Please tasks. I want
That
to
is
know.
really interesting.
I want to know when done or when not done. If it's done through text, i.e., a Slack channel or a Discord channel or Messenger of some kind, like that just adds more friction.
Yeah.
Because if you get a message saying, I've done this task and I think I'm going to do this by next Monday, or I think I'm going to get this done by Friday, I'm like, it doesn't matter when I think you're going to get it done. It's when it's done and when you do certain things, because you can say, I think I'm going to get it done by Friday, and then you add 3 things because you had ideas whilst doing other things. And now you're like, well, now you've got 3 more tasks to do, and now it's not going to get done by Friday. So it's not one task done by Friday, because again, that's the, oh, this has been completed. It's always developing, especially when you're doing topics and writing and videos and projects around things that are evolving and developing,
Yeah.
especially when those topics are around psychology.
In particular when the topics are around psychology. in particular, every time
So,
you think you know something, then you don't.
some of the research, I'm sitting there going, I'm meant to be organizing their stuff, but I want to give them sources on some of the research that they are talking about here, and I want to direct them in certain places. So,
So, one of the things, like you were saying about like directing them in certain places, over your years of consulting with productivity and organization and et cetera, how much coaching, as in the, how much of the coaching did you do and how much of the consulting did you do? Like for your thing, where you just went, here's what you need to do, this is how it should be, do it like that. Because with productivity, that's quite a hard thing for someone from the outside to come in and actually just do. And I was always hyper aware of that because we all function slightly differently.
so I would say I've consulted a couple of times, but that
Mm.
is because that's the individual I've worked with has basically said, I want your system, or give me your system, or set
Ah,
up your system. But everyone else that asks me questions on the free chat or in consulting time, I don't give them answers.
mm.
I give them possibilities. I give them opportunities. And most of those conversations start off with them sharing context, where they're at, what they're doing. And a lot of the time, I would probably say if I was to put a random percentage on it, around 40% of the time, the conversation goes something like they explain topic, they try and explain their problem to me. In the process of them explaining the problem, they realize what they were doing was silly or ineffective in some way. Then they talk themselves through the solutions, and I sit there nodding and going, "Yeah, that sounds good." So for me, that is a coaching situation because I've set them a practice design to explain the problem. But they have then problem solved. They have attuned their focus, their attention, whatever you want to call it. They focused on the problem and then they troubleshooted. They problem solved themselves and came up with the solution. Sometimes there's bits here and there where I can say, well, actually, you could try, or it either you could try this or what if this? So if there's a situation where I think they may have an issue, I'm like, well, what do you think about this? And they go, oh yeah, I didn't think of that. And then again, I've adapted the design to help them problem solve for future potential issues, which comes from my experience. And that to
Mm.
me is coaching. Like, so most of the conversations I have is just me asking people what the problem is, then maybe adding in some potential problems they hadn't thought of. And most of the time they can problem solve it. They can solve it themselves. And that's one of the benefits of using tools that are flexible. Obsidian.
Yeah. What
Well,
about no? What about with Notion? That's an interesting one. Like, what about your experience with consulting in Notion, and how much of that did you do? I assume you've done quite a bit of consulting in
hmm,
Notion.
yeah, hey, it's the same sorts of things, except the this how do I essentially the Notion users want to be told what to do. They want more help. The
Yeah.
Obsidian users want to understand the process. So the Obsidian users I'd have a conversation with and we can troubleshoot, problem solve together. The Notion users tended to be, I have a problem, can you fix it for me? And that was much harder because I can't fix a problem if you can't explain the problem. You can explain symptoms, but explaining symptoms is like saying, look, my knee hurts, and just pointing to the knee. I'm like, yeah, but why? Is it an ache? Is it a scratch? Is it bleeding? Has it been decapitated or amputated? Like, what's wrong with the knee? You can't just say the knee hurts. And that's my experience with a lot of Notion users. They're like, we're not productive. Well, great. Like, how many people are there? Who's managing it? Like, do you have one database, two databases? Is it a task database? Is it a project database? Do you even use databases or is it blocks? Do you have a calendar? Like, tell me the problem. So yeah, that's my experience with Notion users is they want a template and they want to fix all the problems, but they don't actually know what the problems seem to be. I don't know whether that matches your
I
experience.
Yes, very much so, which I personally found really confusing when it came to Notion, because I had the exact opposite experience where it's like, oh, okay, I want to try this then, put a database here and put this in this order and do these things in this way.
From
And
from your experience exploring the tool.
yeah, from my
Yeah.
own experience exploring the tool, it's like why don't I try this? Okay, cool. So I can put this anywhere. Right. I'm going to put this here and in this way and in this way. This is the thing that I'm trying to solve. It's interesting. I think we've spoken about this a long time ago now, but like the templatification.
Made up word.
Yeah, that's what we do here.
Yep.
Of Notion and how it's become a business. There's so much of it is set up for like you need a template to be able to succeed in Notion.
I think it comes back to the fundamentals, the idea of fundamentals. When we're talking ecologically, coaches will say, oh, you need to understand the fundamentals, you need to understand the basics, those sorts of things.
Hmm.
Ecologically, we would suggest that the fundamentals and the basics are just developing task simplification, or it's task simplification in developing the ability to do said skill, whatever the skill is, and then you need to define the measures as to what the skill is going to look like. Can you do this skill under these constraints for that context? And for Notion, I think the fundamentals and the basics is people going, oh, you need to understand the fundamentals. You need to get this template first and know how to use this template, rather than understanding what the template actually is. Like, is it a database? Is
Yeah,
it a
no
load of
one
task
really
blocks?
talks about what it is and how it's built and why it's built and the reasonings behind it. And I think both you and I have tried to do that, but it barely got watched. It was barely conversed about.
I think the people that are interested in making their own stuff, i.e., most of the creators on YouTube at least, they went away and found out how to do enough to recreate the thing.
Yes.
But they didn't try and apply it to their own problems. So you got the same how-to tutorials. This is how you make a YouTube video database. And it was the same database that Thomas Frank had made like the year beforehand. And we're still seeing those sorts of videos pop up now. And it's like 4 years old at this point, 4 or 5 years old at this point.
I'd be
And
so intrigued if Thomas Frank's even using the same system.
no, no, it's not. Like you can see it in his Thomas Frank Explains videos. He's evolved his system with the problems that he's come up with. So he's using like recurring tasks and different databases and projects, and obviously now he's not doing YouTube, but it's less YouTube, more business focused. So his priorities have changed. So his use of Notion has changed, understandably. And so the databases and the Notion has changed because of that. The same with my Obsidian and especially with the Morgan integration. Like my use of Obsidian is changing because of the integration with Morgan. Like that just makes sense for those that haven't seen the video that went out yesterday. The beta testing, it's amazing. Like Obsidian tasks in Morgan. Like
That sounds good.
they also added for insiders in Morgan yesterday custom filters for the task sidebar. Yeah, I can see your eyes light up. So you can bring in like Obsidian tasks, Morgan tasks, and Notion tasks with certain priorities for each of them, all in like a custom filtered list. It's very bare bones at the moment, but it shows you those things. So if you want to see only the high priority tasks from Obsidian, you can filter for that. Or only the low priority tasks for Morgan, you can filter for that. And I imagine they'll be adding in more filters and we'll get some sorts and stuff going in. But yeah, so that's what Morgan have been fiddling with. And obviously that also changes the workflow, changes how you use the tools. I can see like, I'm talking because like John's face is like, oh, update. I want to explore. I want to play buttons. But yeah, so John, back. You're back in the room now.
I am, yeah, just enough.
But yeah, so Notion changes, but I think a lot of people still look for the fundamentals and the basics of templates. This
Yeah.
template worked for this thing. I want a template to work for that thing. Not, well, how does this template work and how can I adjust it?
Yeah, which is why I stepped quite far. I think the consulting in Notion, after recently taking on a couple of projects, it's interesting to see how things have changed in Notion. Like, because I didn't do consulting for a while, but I was not really in there as much. And then I picked up a project recently where I'm building a system for someone. And it was really interesting to see the changes and how people interact with it and how people were thinking about it. Because they were very new to Notion. And I actually really enjoy working with people who are terrified of technology. Because
I'm not
often
sure I understand.
what happens is they look at Notion and like, there's just too many things, too much going on, too much going on. I'm like, okay, cool. So what are you trying to achieve? Like, what's wrong? Well, my tasks are everywhere and I'm overwhelmed by all of the options and it's really clunky and da, 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 da. And it's like, okay, cool. So first of all, let's create like a dashboard. Let's make it look visual. Do you like visual? Yeah, cool. Let's try that. And then it's like, oh, this is incredible. Like I've learned more in this last X amount of time than I've learned in ages. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then I come back later and I'm just like, some something that I've learned over the years of building Notion systems is covers and icons make you way more productive for a lot of the people that I help. I know that's really strange for yourself
No, I think
because
it gets them in.
yeah,
It's a point of attraction.
yeah,
Because
which
as
they're
soon as
not
they
saying.
start working in the thing, or from my experience at least, as soon as they start working in the thing, they're like, okay, we can get rid of this thing now. It's annoying me now.
Oh, that's so interesting. No, no, no. That I've not had that experience.
Yeah, after a couple of months of working with individuals that stay in Notion, they tend to be like, you know, it's scrolling down from the cover is just annoying me now. So
Oh, interesting.
sometimes they keep the icons, but when they make new pages, they don't bother. When they make new SOPs, they don't bother. It's just whatever. I know what this is now. They don't need the icon to help them. And I think the icon on the cover is we could relate that to task simplification because it
Yeah,
makes it easy for individuals to like identify pages. Oh, that's the page I shouldn't edit because it's got a no entry on it, or I shouldn't delete because it's got no entry on it.
yeah,
That's the database that does this thing because it's this cover. They're
yeah.
attuning their focus on minimal or less information. They don't have to look through the whole database because that's difficult for them to start with. Once you're
Mm.
familiar with databases, yeah, whatever. Don't need the cover to help me.
Mm. Yeah.
So you mentioned Notion and you alluded to going back to Notion before this call.
Yes, I'm considering
Expand.
it. No.
Great podcast.
Yeah. So work is picking up quite alarmingly fast, which is great and wonderful. And I'm taking full use of Morgan and all of the lovely stuff that Morgan does. But there's going to be some more project-based things coming in, and there will be a lot of it with a lot of a short time frame with more deadlines. And so to help with that, and judging by what you just told me about
Filters.
the filters, maybe this will completely and utterly change now. But I'll have to go and explore. I have considered bringing Notion back into my workflow as more of a kind of UI experience, just to kind of see at a glance what I'm working on and when I'm working on it.
This is where I'm intrigued because for me, when I look at Notion as a UI experience, it's just a list of tasks, right?
Mm.
And you sort them
Mm.
in a list and you can filter them. Um, but in Morgan, you can do the same thing. So I'm like, where's the difference?
The visual bit of it. So whereas Morgan is just so with Morgan, it's a long list. When when I use Notion, I don't use lists. They are lists, they just look different. I'm actually someone who uses gallery view more than anything.
So you'd use one page for one task in a gallery.
Yeah.
So
So I
is
would
that
have kind of like a dashboard page where I'm what I'm working on now, what I'm working on next, what's like blocked, what's like because there's a lot of whereas before when it's just me, it's fine, but I might be working with more clients and going back and forth with people and things get blocked and things get stuck and figuring out whether I could do that in Morgan, maybe I can. But what I want to be able to do is easy just look at everything I'm working on because I always find lists difficult. Like for me, I find looking through the lists just a little overwhelming when I've got all of the things. I've now started to use the filters so that I can see high, medium, and low priority, which is helping, but it's still a lot of scrolling.
Interesting? Yeah. So I guess obviously I can only speak from my experience using Morgan. I do a lot of project management. Well, I do all of my project management in Morgan, and I don't really tend to look at the lists, as in like the actual lists themselves. Like I think I've got three up. Yeah, so I've got 13 tasks in my inbox, 18 in trampoline, and then five in tech, and then I've got like my Obsidian. thing, which has got like 900 and something. Because Obsidian tasks, obviously, all the task blocks are brought in. So most of my time is spent looking at the overdue and the due today, and then the
Mm.
actual like day thing. So I guess my question would be, what tasks would you want to see in Notion that you can't see in those views in Morgan?
I think they would still go. I would connect Notion
Oh
to
yeah.
Morgan still. I think it is just taking these and visualizing it differently. Because at the moment, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I've got 9 task lists viewable.
Wow. Okay.
So each of the kind of main thing. Now, there is an argument to be made for collapsing some of these in a little bit as I'm kind of looking at it. Some of these could just be merged because they're not as I don't necessarily need to see. So the D&D stuff is separate. There is one for each project as well as me being a player in D&D. So I could see myself merging those down a little bit, but I also like that
Do
separation.
you have to show those lists? Because I've got like 7 lists, but I don't show them if I don't need them for a couple of weeks, for example. Like when I'm working on the book, I will show the book task list. When I'm not, I won't show it.
That's true. I probably could hide more of them. So kind of switch them out depending on the context that I'm working with. And if I'm concentrating on work, all of the personal D&D stuff that's probably a good idea. That might be a good way around it.
I mean, that's just something that I do because I'm like, I don't want to sit like if I find myself scrolling past a task list like 2 or 3 days in a row, I'm just going to hide it or move it down to the bottom. That's
Yeah. So I usually ones that I don't use, I just hide or I put it down at the bottom.
Yeah. I mean, because my use of Obsidian, which is what I thought your use of Notion would be, is that I have writing, I have scripts, and I have planned things like links and images and the rest of it. I need a file, so that's what my Obsidian tasks are for. It's like when it's in my Morgan, I just click the Obsidian, it opens it up in Obsidian, and now I can write the thing, do the thing. That's what I thought you were going to say you were using Notion for, not like the actual viewing of tasks.
Maybe I won't in reflection. I'm still going to play with it and see
Mm.
what I can do.
Yeah, I guess it's a related question. When you have a project, so I'm going to use a video as an example for me. Video is a project. Name of the video, obviously, is normally the name of the task. Then during that, there are other tasks that you do. So research, script, record, edit, publish. Do you have subtasks for those things?
I played with some tasks for a while. They annoyed me.
Agreed. So how do you manage those smaller things?
I put them in as tasks. So at the moment, I don't really have projects. I just have tasks. And I think part of
As in
what
so you'd have video and then you'd have edit video, record video as individual tasks.
I would have edit X video,
Hmm.
record X video. So I would skip the top bit. It would just be I do this thing. I've got to
But
do
they
that.
but they're separate tasks in Morgan.
Yes.
Interesting. See, I don't get that.
No, I think you have one task which you drag in, schedule, and then rename.
Yeah.
I did that for a while, but what I was finding for me is like when I was trying to figure out what I needed to do with something, I was like completely not able to remember what the next step was. And so I was spending an awful lot of time
Is that with
just
a different project? Like a different type of project? Yeah. Yeah, see, that's where I write
because when it's just me on my own, like for example with D&D, I could very easily just put a task in, rename it. That would kind of work most of the time. But when it comes to interacting with other people, when I've got clients and I have to remember to follow up with someone or do a thing or stuff like really granular stuff, I'm less likely to remember to do those things.
So what I've done recently with my tasks for like Eastbourne Trampoline, doing some of the policies and procedures, responses, etc. I've got one task that says health and safety safeguarding. But in that task, whenever things come up, so if I need to email someone or email someone else, or I'm waiting on an email about that task, it's in the notes section. So when I started, it was just do this thing, and I thought it was just a case of write the policy. But it turns out that in order to write the policy, I needed to get a template. So inside of the notes, I was like, confirm BG template for this thing. So I ticked the task off, but it was a multiple session task. So the first bit had been done. Then I was like, oh, I need to do something else. So now the task is like 8 or 9 different lines inside the notes of what I've done in the past for that. And then moving forwards with some of the others, I'm like, oh, I need to do these 3 things. So for a DBS check, I need to get someone that's a regulatory body to do the DBS. Then I need to actually do the DBS. Then I need to pay for the DBS, assuming it's mine or someone else's. So those 3 subtasks I put in the note of the main task rather than having them a subtask because
Oh, that
one,
makes sense.
yeah, because one, the subtask obviously builds out the list, which is mildly irritating. And 2, it's easier to see, like, looking back, what it is that I've done. Because if it's a task and I tick the task off and I'm at like stage 4 of this thing, I'm like, wait, have I done that yet? And I have to go back in my archive to find the task. Whereas if it's just in that project task in Morgan, I can just see and go, oh yeah, I have done that. I did that before.
Mm.
So that's how I
I
manage
might
it now.
try that. I might give that a go because that's quite a nice. What I would love is the ability. So with the AI,
Hmm.
they add the little extra like hard
Energy.
tasks, which I
Yeah.
love. I still don't like frames. They are not working for me.
I like the idea of frames. I don't like the
Yeah,
way that we have to execute right now.
yeah, I don't like how it's executed. None of the tasks I want go where I want them to go. So I end
Yeah.
up just doing it manually anyway.
Yeah. What they had before was better.
Yeah, the ability to just go, oh, here's things that are, oh, cool, yeah, yeah. But anyway, beside the point, rant over. I would love to be able to have. So they mention about having urgent tasks. I would love to be able to put an icon in and that assigns that like a little icon and stuff like that would be really nice.
What do you mean? Put an
So
icon
let
in
so,
and
so if I put like the alarm emoji, it marks it as urgent so that when I schedule in with the AI, for example, it would put that in first.
oh, okay, I see what you mean. Well, obviously that the AI, I think at the moment is looking at the priority and the due date as to see what's urgent or not. But what you're saying
You
is you want,
think so?
well, it did,
It's not. Like I have found so there's one task that isn't due until November. Like
right?
that keeps getting scheduled to be done on a day. And I'm like, this is not until December, like November. No, stop scheduling that darn task.
Well,
And then
if
I've got
I
stuff
guess
that's
if
like
there's no other
due.
tasks that are due, then it's
There
like,
are.
oh, right. So it's picking
There
that
was,
one over the others.
yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah, it's really weird. It is
Hmm.
very, very weird.
All right. Yeah, I think that sounds more like a an AI selection issue rather than a
Mm.
an adding a new feature. But yeah, I agree. That is a bit odd.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Then I guess moving on, I guess. Yes,
No, let's just stay here forever.
right.
Yes.
LA. I might be going to LA.
Oh yeah. What?
So without disclosing too much information of the behind the scenes, I might be able to work out how Eastbourne Trampoline will work without me there. So it means that all I need to do is consider travel and accommodation, because I've spoken with Tiago, which is nice. So got got ticket, just need travel and thingy to get that sorted, and then I will be out there for probably 5 days, which I think will be good fun.
Yeah.
Learning lots, and I think it would be good fun to talk to people in person, which is what I
Yeah.
wanted to discuss. Because a lot of the coaches I've spoken to are online. Some
Mm.
of them may be listening to this. I haven't met them in person. Like, we didn't meet in person for like, what, 3 years? So I guess, do you think meeting in person is worth the cost of travel?
Mm. It depends, obviously.
Yeah. On what though? That's the thing.
It depends on one, I don't know, whether you find the person interesting enough to actually meet with them. Like, because if they're not very interesting and you're just meeting with them out of obligation, no, it's boring.
Yeah,
But if
agreed.
you're, but why would you want to? It depends on why you're wanting to meet them.
And that's an interesting question because of what I've heard from other sports coaches I've tried to meet is there always seems to be an agenda. Like, what do you want from this? What do you want to get from this? And for me as a coach, I'm like, well, why can't we just talk? And I'm in a similar way. It's like I don't have a goal, an objective, a thing to get from them. I just want to talk because I don't know what will emerge in those conversations. Like when I first spoke with Ali and Tiago at the Notion meetup back in what, 21, 20, no, it must have been 22, end of 22. When I spoke with them, I didn't have an agenda. I didn't, well, I still don't when I speak to them. I don't like want something from them. It's just having a conversation, having a chat.
That's so interesting because for me, when I have conversations with people, especially at first, they're I want a reason, not to get necessarily get something out of them, but there is a point, there is an objective, there is a goal to help um make it easier to start the conversation. Somewhere to start. I'm simplifying the task of a conversation so that I know where to start. Because otherwise I would just go talk about hundreds of different things and probably go ask really deep questions way too early.
So when you say way too early, I was having a conversation with another coach online. We spoke for an hour, a total of an
Yeah.
hour. Within the first 10 minutes, both of us had explained our backgrounds, our
Mm.
situations currently, and what we were looking to do moving forwards. And both of us had explained why we don't do certain things, which were personal reflective.
Ah.
We had never spoken before. They knew literally nothing about me. I
Mm.
knew a little bit about them. I
Mm.
reached out and like 2 days, I reached out on Facebook. 2 days later, we were on a Zoom call. And I would say the conversation was a reflective conversation, far deeper than you would expect from two random people that had never spoken before. And yes, it was about coaching,
That's
but
so interesting.
but I think that's the framing of the conversation. So when you say getting too deep too early, I'm like, okay, well, we were talking about our disabilities and the struggles we had when we were younger, competing in trampoline as children, and struggles at school within 20 minutes of the conversation. To
Mm.
me, that's quite deep stuff. Like
Yeah.
I was talking about my struggles with hearing at school, and they were talking about their struggles in certain disabilities that they had throughout their childhoods and struggles they had with relationships with teachers. And again, that's like 20 minutes, half hour into the conversation. Some people look and go, well, that's a really deep conversation. But I don't think it is. I think that's, for me, a useful conversation to build in context.
Yeah.
It's got you thinking now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I go there, when I go to LA, if again, if it's still like an if, because still need to sort out logistics and stuff, but it's more of a yes than a no now. But if I go there, it's not I want to get something out of this conversation. It's I want to hear your story. That's basically it.
Hmm.
I want to, like if there is a point to be made, I want to learn from your story.
See, that's the thing. I also feel that, but I don't feel I need to be there in person to do it. So like I just want to if I talk to someone, I just want to learn about them and hear about what they do and their experiences and all that. But I don't feel the need to be in person to do it.
I think on a video call it works.
Yes.
Any other medium? No. Like I think it needs to be synchronized communication.
Yes, agreed.
And I think it needs to be visual. It can't be
Yes.
over text because if it's over text, then people are thinking about it and taking time. And no, instant responses. So synchronized communication over a video call. I can agree to an extent, but what you miss, or what I think we miss with video call, is movement. It's
Mm.
behavior. Like when I met you in Germany, there were things that I recognized that I could attune to that I couldn't see on a call, like how you walk, how tall you are, how you move through buildings. That tells me a lot about your character and how you interact with the world. Your decisions about travel or not travel, or food or not food, like those small decisions, the interactions with other people as we're walking past people, how you walk past people, how you walk next to people, those sorts of things for me tell me a lot about how you interact with the world.
Mm.
And it gives me more information about you as a person, you as a story. And you can't get any of that with someone sitting in a chair looking at a camera.
So interesting.
Do you feel like you learned a lot from me in Berlin that you didn't know from the 3 years we spoke beforehand? You mentioned obviously the activity, and you've mentioned the carefreeness,
Yeah, but I sort of got that from you anyway, from our conversations just over the 3 years.
because the first thing that you said to me after Berlin was about how relaxed I was.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, So it's like even though you heard me say I'm relaxed
that's true.
and the
Even though I heard
conversations
it,
were relaxed,
I knew you were relaxed, but I didn't I think it was the intent. This sounds very odd. The intensity of your relaxedness.
you were too relaxed.
Like you are so laid back, you're almost horizontal. And I'm so not in my life, that is not the same experience that I have with 90% of everyone, as you probably got from me in person.
That has shifted though. Like
Hmm.
from Berlin to when I came down to you or over to you in Tiverton, like there
Yeah,
is an obvious difference.
yeah. Which which Tory noticed
Mm,
and mentioned.
yeah. And that's to me why in person is important.
I do not disagree.
But at the start of the question, you weren't sure. And
Mm.
and that is what's interesting. I think when people reflect on in-person conversations, because there's not much objective data that you can say, oh, yes, that's better, and this is good for this
Yeah,
reason. It's hard to justify, especially with the cost of travel. I may be being a bit old-fashioned. I know I'm only 27, maybe a bit old-fashioned, and because I'm in sport, it's all person to person. But being in person gives you more information about an individual's story.
I've got that experience coming in a couple of weeks with someone that I've spoken to over the years. Yeah, but that's why I go to conferences. Like, as I'm just reflecting on that, that is why I go to Atomicon, and that's why I went to all the conferences that I went to. That's why I go to the Big Festoon, because I don't care what people say on the presentations. I want to talk to people afterwards. I mean, I'm fairly not great at it,
There's room
but
for
that's
improvement.
just exactly. But it's interesting to see to watch people and see how they interact with each other and how they engage, and even with someone who I work with, seeing the difference of them in person versus like just on social media, because we don't really have very many like conversations, is very different. So yes,
Those
yeah,
behind the scenes conversations is what you get in person, which you rarely get on a Zoom call. 'Cause
unless of
it's normally
course you
like a blocked
start,
out time of we're going to talk about
yeah,
this and this is the agenda.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like the small
I
things,
I
like do you have a sock drawer or do you have two sock drawers? Because some people split socks. Yeah, did you know that? So some people have their sports socks in one drawer and their social socks in another drawer.
no, I
It's
did not.
especially as well, for me, I don't separate those socks, but I separate them in the drawer. So I make sure I have my sports socks at the front on the right and my social socks at the back because my sports socks get absolutely wrecked. Like I sweat in them, they get torn to pieces because I'm on trampolines, so the
Nice.
bottoms get taken. Whereas when I go socially, I don't really want these socks that look like they've been like pulled and shredded. So I separate those socks. But that's the
Yeah.
sort of conversation I had with, I can't remember who it was. I had it with someone just like walking around. I think it was, yeah, I know who it was. It was a coach locally. I was having I had this conversation with them because we were just walking around the facility talking about, I think it was like some stuff on the floor. That doesn't just pop up in a Zoom call conversation
Mm-mm.
most of the time, anyway. Unless you're having a conversation like this with in a podcast where it may come up just like this. But still, there wouldn't have been much of a reason for me to tell you that apart from the story that I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Whereas in that situation, and the relationship that we had on the court with the coach, that topic came out, which I don't think you get online.
No.
Similar with
No.
coaching. like coaching when people are on the phone, you don't get those sort of interactions. Whereas when they're actually there, you learn things about people. Like one of the kids that I'm coaching, I learned that he plays Minecraft, which is like, oh, okay, cool. But he also follows certain Minecrafters. And we started talking about the game of Minecraft. Instead of him being on his phone, not paying attention to his phone, not me, we were talking about Minecraft. I'm like, that only happens when you're in person. You're actually in person.
Mm,
I still think phones and technology has a big role to play in the world,
yeah.
but in person has a big role to play too. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have another topic I want to share. Is there anything else you want to add before we move on?
No.
So, I don't know whether you know this, but being deaf isn't an eligible disability for the Paralympics. You look just as confused as everyone else that I've told this to. So, if you're deaf, you can't compete in the Paralympics unless you have another disability that is eligible. Did you not know that? Okay, just to confirm for the audience, John just said no and looks very confused.
No.
So there is
What?
something, yeah. So if you're deaf, you're not in one of the categories. So there's 10
What
categories in the
about what about what about blind then? Like partial, like if you're partially sighted, what about that?
yeah, there's a category for visual impairment.
Right.
So there's 10 categories in the Paralympics. 8 of them are physical impairments. One of them is visual impairment, and one of them is intellectual impairment. But because deaf people are physically able, it doesn't come under a Paralympic category. And the IOC, when they were organizing all of this, had a conversation with the people in charge of the Deaf Olympics, which so the Deaf Olympics started before the Paralympics, like 40 years before the Paralympics, and it's been around ever since. But when the organizers of all these organizations got together, there was a disagreement between the Paralympics and the Deaf Olympics organizers. Long story short, the Paralympics wanted to reduce the amount of events, which obviously reduced the amount of athletes, which that was a bit of an issue. They wanted to go from 19 events to 3. Right, okay. They also, Paralympic Committee, the IOC, obviously wanted more control over the deaf sports when it comes to funding and marketing and organizing and just doing that sort of stuff, which from my understanding, again, the deaf sports didn't really want that. And this is me learning as I go. And then the third reason, which is like a really obvious reason, is interpreters. Like, if you're going to have deaf sport, you need interpreters for the officials, for the spectators, if you're in the hearing world, and if you're going to communicate around like where places are, where the things are, how to get to places, all of that requires interpreters, which are extremely hard to come by in high quantity and are very expensive. um, so the IOC and the Paralympics didn't really want to spend all of that.
Fun.
So there is the Olympics, the Paralympics, and the Deaf Olympics, but also the Special Olympics for special educational needs. I don't know much about the Special Olympics because that's not what I've researched at the moment, but I am interested in the Deaf Olympics because 1, I work with these. I am half deaf, and 3, I found out a few months ago that deaf athletes don't get any funding. Any, as in zero, as in nada, nilch, none whatsoever. So this to me just baffles me. It baffles me. And what has spurred this conversation for me, because I knew this going back sort of 4-ish months now, is that on the Paralympics they have interpreters on screen, and you're like, oh, there must be deaf people competing. And you have deaf people presenting, but you hardly ever see deaf athletes because they need to have another disability. And the more I've looked into this, the more I've realized that the Paralympics, although is somewhat inclusive, it's very exclusive because people aren't disabled enough. Some of the British athletes have been told that they can't compete anymore in the event that they got medals in 2012 because the categories have changed and they're now not disabled enough. Some of the swimmers are now not disabled enough, so they've been stopped. So their funding from the Paralympic Committee has been stopped because they no longer can compete because they're not disabled enough. Sometimes it's the individual, sometimes it's the whole disorder because it can't be justified as a disability. And you're like, what? So yeah, that's like a whole thing. And what I would, what I guess I would want to know as a hearing person trying to understand the culture of the deaf community is whether they would even want to go into the Paralympics. Like, yes, they would want all the benefits that come with it. Obviously, money, yes. Exposure, yes. But they can't lose the culture. Like, you shouldn't lose a culture to be part of this other thing. Like, just I guess maybe this is the naivety of me and the optimism of me, but can't you just put the Deaf Olympics as another mini sport in the Paralympics? Because when you look at the Paralympics, it's not sport. Like it's not athletics 100 meters. It's athletic 100 meters times however many categories you have in that. So you might have the men's and the women's and the men's category 4 and 7 and 10. So you've got like 10 100-meter final races. Whereas in because of all the categories. So it's not like I'm going to watch the 100-meter final men's. It's I'm going to watch the 100-meter final men's category 4, 7, 10, or whatever the other categories are, because I can't remember them all because there's loads of them because they change their letters and things for the different events. And it's the same with the other sports. It's like I'm going to watch the football, or I'm going to watch the blind football. There's not one event, whereas in the Deaf Olympics it is. I'm going to watch the men 100 meters. I'm going to watch the women 100 meters. It's the same as the Olympics, except the deaf.
It's just added in, but it's the tape and the society nonsense of it. It's the
A
control.
little bit. A little bit, but I think it's the deaf community, the deaf culture. It's the struggle that they have in everyday societal life, which is we need to sort out transport. We need to sort out communication, basically. How do we go from the Olympic Village to the sports venue? How do we communicate with the officials? How do we communicate with the coaches and the spectators without it being extortionately expensive? Because the Deaf Olympics is run through sign language. Everyone uses sign language. There might be a couple of interpreters for a couple of officials here and there.
And it is.
And that to me is a modern problem. Like, how have we not solved this?
Yeah.
I'm bashing my head. Like, how have we not solved this yet? We have interpreters on the Paralympics. We have deaf people presenting, but we don't have deaf athletes competing unless they have another disability. It just, I recognize I'm not part of the community as much as other people are. So I don't want to be like overly passionate and like start punching walls and things because I'm not one of them. But I'm just baffled as a hearing person, and your face summarizes my frustration. I told my sister that deaf people can't compete in the Paralympics, and she was so confused. And you were exactly the same. You were so confused.
It doesn't make sense.
And I feel like most people are the same. How have we not solved this? It's just
doesn't make
what?
sense. Doesn't make sense.
But yeah, I feel like we're missing out. How is the modern society not like at least push this more?
I don't know.
Now, I recognize there are some scandalous stuff that's going on in deaf sport, like the last, I think, 2 or 3 presidents, main organizers, have been put into prison for embezzlement. But Paralympic sport isn't exactly clean, with the Spanish intellectual basketball team, 10 of them being perfectly able. That was a big scandal. Did you not know? Yeah, you don't know about that. So, in the, I think 2 Paralympics ago, I think it was the one before. Was it the one before London or the one after London? I can't remember. Basically, the Spanish basketball team, the intellectually impaired basketball team, had 10 people out of 12 that weren't intellectually disabled. So they had perfectly abled individuals competing in a intellectually disabled event. And believe it or not, they won gold. Who would have thought? They had 5 semi-professional players playing for their team. Yeah, gobsmack. So the Paralympic have had their own issues. The story came out like 2 weeks after because one of the people that was competing for the Spanish basketball team was a journalist and he let loose. But yeah, and the guy running it went to prison, of course. But yeah, so the Paralympics isn't exactly clean themselves.
I have so many layers of questions.
The world is filled with unethical, immoral individuals, and it's all in sport. It all comes out in sport. I mean, it's one of the reasons that the enhanced games is potentially coming around. You know about that, right? So the enhanced games is essentially, you're going to laugh when you hear, it's essentially a games where everyone is on drugs. So it's for drug tests.
I seem to be making the same face quite a lot today. Like,
Sport is great. Yeah, so essentially, I can't remember the guy's name, but a billionaire decided why not have an enhanced games where every athlete can do testing for drugs and anti-doping and all the rest of it because everyone's enhanced. Moment of silence while cogs go round.
so many questions. Just... So basically, once you're not good enough,
So if
you've got
if
to
you're able,
dope yourself. So if you're able to become better, you should dope yourself up and then join a.
no. If you're able-bodied and don't want to take drugs and compete with people that don't want to take drugs, you go into the. If you're disabled, but disabled in the right ways, you can compete in the Paralympics. If you're disabled in the wrong ways, you can't compete. And if you're deaf, you can compete in the Deaf Olympics, but not the Paralympics. But if you want to take drugs, you can compete in the enhanced games. But if you're disabled and you take drugs, you can't compete in the Paralympics because now you're doping. The same with the Deaf Olympics. So maybe we'll have a enhanced Paralympics and enhanced Deaf Olympics as well. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
Words.
yeah. Elite sport is just baffling.
Yeah.
Let's end it on that one. Is there anything you want to say?
No. I genuinely cannot find anything to say right now.
Yep. Right. Thanks.